Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion on what has become an increasingly important topic in our society, and that is responsible gambling. With me today are Richard Henry of Rise Life Management Services. He's the Associate Psychologist and Program Manager, and Camille Blake, Educational Social Worker at the Ministry of Education and Youth. So, Richard, I know that you're heavily involved in the training of guidance counselors to bring awareness to the issue and to help them to negotiate the challenges that they face with underage gambling in schools. How often do you have your training? And is it something that is repeated year on year with the same guidance counselors, or?
That's a good question because we do it annually, and we present them with a manual that we had created, helping. It's a 6 to 8 lesson plan. And so what we're trying to do, because RISE can't be everywhere across Jamaica at the same time, we don't have enough personnel. Our greatest partners, and we have made no bones about this, are guidance counselors, because guidance counselors are in the schools. So we have trained them, equipped them with the skills to be able to do the prevention piece, really. And so we expect them to introduce the prevention, underage gambling prevention manual in their schools. I think this year we completed training with all available guidance counselors across the island. And again, this is thanks to the support and funding of the BGLC. And so we're hoping that our manual doesn't get shelved. We know that guidance counselors are extremely busy, but that they implement, especially the guidance counselors we have at the primary school level. Because we have recognized that doing prevention in the high schools is not the primary prevention that we want to do. By the time we get to some high schools, there are quite a number of students already gambling. And so that intervention is a different type of intervention. We have gone as far back as to grade 3 in the primary schools. And so because of the environment that we live in now, in terms of gambling being intensified, it's important for us to introduce these ideas, these concepts of not being involved with gambling, and when you see gambling happening, what does that mean? And if you notice, there are adults being involved. What are the consequences for young people under 18 if they get involved with gambling? We believe those concepts need to be introduced very, very early.
Okay. Do you have any stats on underage gambling?
Yeah, but our stats, again, is dated. The last study, and the only study so far on gambling among adolescents and children in Jamaica, is the only study done in English-speaking Caribbean in 2007. That study stated that 1 in 5 young persons would have been exposed to and have the possibility of developing a gambling-related problem, which works out to about 20%, which is fairly high. Good to say, again, sponsorship through the BGLC. There's a study being conducted right now, and hoping to get it done by the end of the year in schools, where we should get even better and more richer data that would tell us, would drive the way, not just the way that we do treatment, but the way that we do prevention, and what are the issues that the young people are facing who are involved with gambling, and how it is that we can better intervene and help them. So the only data we have now is a little dated, and that was 1 in 5, 20%. That's still very high, although you would realize that internationally, rates of underage gambling are much higher than rates of adult gambling. So it seems as if there are a lot of young people who develop issues around gambling, and as they get older, a lot of them age out of it.
Camille, what advice would you give to parents and guardians about the risks of underage gambling?
First of all, the parents need to know what is happening with their children. That's the first sign. And the risk that they need to understand that stealing may be going to be paramount for them to be able to sustain their gambling habit. So they're going to start stealing from them. And when they can't get it from their parents, they're going to be going outside. There's going to be increased behavioral issues that is going to be happening. And most time parents do not want to be disrupted from their job because of child getting into small issues. But the small issues that they're getting involved in is because of gambling. So I'm trying to tell parents that any signs, once you get called in by the guidance counselor, take this in hand quickly. We always educate them that there is Rise Life that is there to provide the support. Do not wait to reach to a level where the principal now deciding that I can't keep this child in my school any longer, because based on the intervention they would have been trying to give, the child is not being responsive. And what I've realized with some of the parents, they do encourage this behavior. And like what I was saying before, it all goes down to finances. And we are trying to tell parents that we can't allow our children to be the breadwinner of the family. And if they are becoming the breadwinner of the family, they start taking out big people, basically big people behavior. And when they do this now, there's a more chronic issues in our school system, more problems for our guidance counselors, more problem for the ministry. And when we don't have the resources to respond to these needs, this is what we're seeing existing in our society presently. So I'm asking the parents, if you're having challenges, financial challenges, do not just have the conversation with your children. That's the reason we have our guidance counselors. There are too many welfare programs that are in the school system and the government providing the PATH program to provide financial support to you. So try to see how best you can nip it from early to get the help. Reach out to us, even at the ministry, because that's why we have 3 social workers in the Region 1 office. In other regions, you have 2 to 3 different set of social workers that can help children. So parents, you just need to ensure that you know what is available to you and utilize these resources so that you can get the support that you need.
So some key messages coming out there. Nip it in the bud early. So any early signs of gambling, approach, get help as quickly as possible, and don't turn to gambling as a means of
responding to your needs.
Responding to needs. Don't wait for anything to balloon out of control. As soon as a parent sees an issue, nip it in the bud and go to guidance counselors for assistance.
It is also important. So in working with the Ministry of Education and Youth, we also do, the issue of underage gambling is an issue that you have to approach from a holistic perspective. It's not just about the students. You have to look at the environment and the environment community. You have to look at home. And so we do PTAs. When we do PTAs twofold. Not only are we trying to send the messages and help parents understand the issue of underage gambling, but I think it's also important to speak to parents about their own gambling. And so while we don't believe that there's anything wrong with gambling if you're doing it in a healthy way, we still expect parents to look at their gambling and to be able to measure whether or not they're modeling behavior that the children might be picking up and taking to school as well. And so we encourage parents who gamble to, if they need to talk to someone, if they need to come to Rise to get help. Data has shown us in the past that most students who have a gambling-related problem have at least one role model that they're seeing gambling. And that doesn't have to be a parent. It could be an uncle who's a mentor. It could be an aunt. But there's somebody significant in that family who is indulging in that behavior that youngster is actually seeing. So it's also very important to speak to persons about adults about their own gambling as well. But in terms of helping young people to understand the consequences are far-reaching. One of the issues, one of the goals of our program is to help young people to remain focused on goal setting. And if you have goals of becoming a lawyer or a doctor and you get involved with gambling, how does the roadmap to get to be a lawyer, doctor, police officer, how does that include gambling? Because you have to finish high school, and we're seeing a lot of young people get into gambling and start with a suspension, another suspension, and there are some schools that give you a number of strikes and then you're out of school. Gambling would have derailed your goal setting activity. So there are a lot of other issues. Most young people who are involved with gambling are sometimes involved with a gang and criminal behavior.
So Richard, is it the gambling that leads to participation in gang behavior, or is it participation in gang behavior that springs to gambling?
I would believe that it is participating in gambling, because you find that most young people who are involved in gambling activity in schools have shifted their friendships and their social circles. And so usually kids who are gambling are hanging out with other kids who are gambling. If you hang out with other kids who are gambling, there's a likelihood that you are also hanging out in the same bunch with kids who are going to be using substances. You're going to be hanging out with kids who are involved in criminal activity. Because there are a lot of spin-offs and a lot of correlations between gambling activity and substance misuse, criminal behavior, early sexual activity, that sort of thing. And so, again, you're dealing with a whole social circle that you have to go in and intervene. I just want to make mention of the program that Camille spoke about, which we sort of have revitalized that rise. And it's a critical program, especially because, again, the numbers that we have in terms of being able to go out to schools and do individual counseling. So the session she's talking about for kids who are what we call at the stage of indicated type of prevention, meaning these are kids who are already feeling negative effects from their gambling. And what we ask schools to do is to organize those kids, bust them to rise, and we have 4 weeks of group sessions. And the group sessions are fairly intense because we start at 9 and we end maybe at 1 o'clock. They get a snack in between. And we're able now to discuss a lot with them in terms of why are you gambling? Where's your gambling going to lead you? Do you have some other goals that you want to achieve? How are we going to achieve those other goals? What's happening at home that you're seeing? And a lot of emotional work as well, because the kids do come out and share in that session. So that
sounds like some really well needed guidance for students.
It's a critical program. We intend to grow that program more because, as Camille was saying, we get a lot of numbers of kids who need help. But if we were to do individual counseling, we wouldn't be able to manage it. So we have chosen a group format. We used to do it in the past when the program just started. And then we shifted to looking at prevention. So there are 2 different types of possibilities. So most organizations will go into prevention to say, hey, we don't want to deal with the kids who already developed the problem. There are not a lot of them. What we want to do is keep kids who are not gambling. And that program is very important.
And that is a program that you work with the BGLC with.
Right.
By going into primary schools.
And high schools when we get called to do sensitization
sessions.
So that's critical. We're not going to stop doing that. But we also recognize that we have kids who have problems already with gambling. And if we don't have that sort of intervention, the numbers are different from going in and doing primary prevention. But it's important for us to give an ear and share also with those kids and help them to get well. The numbers are not as great, but if data has shown us before that kids who develop gambling problems early take those gambling problems into adulthood and also then get into a more serious addiction, that's going to have ramifications for a family, for the country, for the individual. And so it's a program that we intend to ramp up with the BGLC and really grow it some more if we can. And I know that the ministry is happy that we are doing it now. The only difficulty is that some of the schools are across the island and it's difficult for them to come.
Right.
I think as we go along, we'll try and figure that out. But for right now, we're booked weekly with kids, and we're probably doing about each group probably no less than 15 kids per day.
So tell me, do you also see, I know you work with traditional primary and high schools, but for the non-traditional schools, such as schools for children with disability, or hearing impairment or sight impairment, do you approach those schools? Are you seeing this similar type of behavior in those types of schools?
Well, we don't see those behaviors, but because we're an all-inclusive program,
you want to sensitize them as well.
Of course, and we would be doing an injustice to those schools and to the faith that has been given to us through the BGLC to run this program. We can't overlook persons with disabilities. And again, if we talk about economics driving people to gambling, a lot of persons in Jamaica who have disabilities tend to be at the lower end of the spectrum and probably have more need and desire to gamble, to be able to win money, to be able to survive. And so we want to also educate those kids. So we go to Listamere Gilby School for the Deaf, as well as Danny Williams School for the Deaf. We have a great relationship with them. And we annually do, well, it's more than annually, we actually go in twice a year, and we do sensitization sessions with those students. We've not been approached by them to say, well, we have 10 kids who are gambling,
Good.
so everything looks good there, but we're not going to let off the gas in terms of continuing to educate them so that when they come out of school, they're seeing what's happening on TV, they're seeing adverts. They too have to make decisions about whether they want to get involved with gambling. So
Correct.
certainly, and of course, the School for the Blind. We've had a request to put our manual into Braille so that the persons who teach at the school, the Salvation Army School for the Blind, can actually use our prevention manual to teach the students. And that's something that we are trying to look into. And of course, we'll seek more funding from the BGLC to do.
Thank you for joining us on the second episode of the BGLC podcast, Risky Business, Youth and Gambling. Stay tuned for episode 3.